Revenge Office Stories. My boss looked me right in the eye, her gaze cold and unyielding like a predator sizing up its prey, and said, "Your position is no longer required." Just like that, I was fired, cast out into the unknown without a second thought. She thought she was burying her secret deep in the ground by getting rid of me, the one person who had stumbled upon her web of deceit. What she didn't know was that I'd left behind a little parting gift with a 1-year timer, a digital bomb set to detonate at the perfect moment. For 365 long, agonizing days, I just waited, holding my breath through sleepless nights and endless what-ifs. And on the 1-year anniversary of my firing, karma didn't just knock on her door. It kicked it right off the hinges in front of the entire company, exposing her lies to the harsh light of day and shattering her carefully constructed facade. This wasn't just a simple workplace drama. It was a tale of betrayal, resilience, and sweet, inevitable justice. I had poured my soul into that job, only to have it ripped away by someone who saw me as nothing more than a threat. But in the end, the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. As I reflect on that pivotal moment, I realize how my story is a testament to the power of patience and planning in the face of overwhelming odds. It started innocently enough in a job I loved, but quickly spiraled into a nightmare that tested every ounce of my strength. Before Eleanor showed up like a storm cloud on the horizon, my job was my sanctuary, a safe haven amid the turbulence of life. My name's Haley, and for 5 solid years, I was a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized tech firm nestled in the bustling heart of Silicon Valley. Honestly, it was a great place to work, with innovative projects and a team that felt like an extended family. I wasn't just some number cruncher buried in a cubicle. I helped build our internal reporting system from the ground up, designing algorithms that streamlined data flow and provided real-time insights. The dashboards our VPs checked every single morning, those were mine, complete with interactive visualizations that turned raw data into actionable strategies. I was proud of my work, people respected my skills, and I genuinely loved the puzzles my job threw at me, deciphering financial trends, forecasting market shifts, and ensuring our company's fiscal health. That stability at work meant everything, especially since my personal life was falling apart like a house of cards in a windstorm. Over those few years, I was losing both of my parents to cancer, a slow and heartbreaking process that left me emotionally drained. My mother passed first, after months of chemotherapy that ravaged her body but never her spirit. My father followed suit, his diagnosis coming just as I was beginning to grieve. Work was the one place where I felt in control, where what I did mattered beyond the hospital visits and funeral plans. It was my structured, logical reality when everything else was just chaos and heartache, endless medical bills, late-night worries about treatments, and the gnawing fear of being truly alone. I poured all my grief and anxiety into my projects, finding a weird sort of comfort in balancing spreadsheets and running complex simulations. My coworkers were supportive, sharing coffee breaks where we'd talk about anything but my troubles, and my manager at the time totally understood the pressure I was under, granting me flexible hours without question. The company felt like family, with team-building events and genuine camaraderie. I was dedicated, maybe a little too much, often staying late to perfect reports or mentor junior analysts. But I thought my loyalty and hard work were what my career was built on, a solid foundation of trust and achievement. I had no idea that the foundation I was standing on was about to be completely demolished by one person, a force of nature disguised as a professional. The office itself was a modern wonder, with open-plan layouts, ergonomic chairs, and walls adorned with motivational posters about innovation and integrity. We had perks like free lunches on Fridays and quarterly hackathons where ideas flowed freely. It was the kind of environment that made you excited to come in every day, fostering creativity and collaboration. Little did I know, this idyllic setup was about to be poisoned by an outsider who would turn it into a battlefield. It all started when my old manager got promoted to a higher role in another department, leaving a void that the company filled by hiring his replacement from outside. Her name was Eleanor, a sharp-dressed woman in her mid-40s with a resume boasting stints at Fortune 500 companies. On her first day, she was all bright smiles and corporate buzzwords, talking about synergy and new paradigms in our introductory team meeting, complete with a PowerPoint presentation filled with charts and graphs. She came from some bigger, more cutthroat firm in New York, and she carried that energy with her like a perfume you couldn't escape, intense, overwhelming, and subtly toxic. The mask slipped, and it slipped fast, revealing the cracks beneath her polished exterior. Within a month, the collaborative spirit our team had nurtured for years was just gone, evaporated like morning dew under a scorching sun. It was replaced by this culture of fear, where every email felt like a potential landmine. Eleanor was a master of manipulation, a psychological tactician who knew exactly how to play people against each other. She'd praise you in a meeting, highlighting your contributions with exaggerated enthusiasm, then tear your work to shreds in a private email 2 minutes later, nitpicking details that were irrelevant or outright fabricated. She started taking credit for my ideas, passing off my analysis as her own in meetings with the execs, claiming she had refined them when all she'd done was slap her name on the document. My teammates, good people I'd worked with for years, folks like Sarah from marketing who always brought homemade cookies, or Mike the IT guy who fixed my computer crashes with a smile, started avoiding my gaze in the hallways, their conversations turning hushed when I approached. Everyone was just trying to survive her reign of terror, whispering warnings in the break room about her moods and demands. The real trouble started about 6 months in, during what should have been a mundane task. I was doing a routine quarterly audit of our division's expenses, a process I'd handled a dozen times without issue. But this time, the numbers weren't just off. They made no sense, jumping around like they were part of a bad magic trick. There were huge discrepancies in client billing, with figures clearly inflated to meet quarterly targets. Projects that had barely broken, even suddenly showing profits in the millions. At first, I figured it was a system glitch, perhaps a bug in the new software update we'd rolled out. I spent hours cross-referencing databases, running diagnostic scripts, and even consulting with IT. But the deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became, and profitable projects were logged as massive successes, with fabricated invoices and adjusted timelines. Expenses were being shuffled around to hide overspending, moved from one category to another like pieces in a shell game. This was deliberate, and it was slick, executed with the precision of someone who knew the system inside out. And all the digital breadcrumbs, timestamps on edits, IP addresses from logins, and metadata on files, led straight back to Eleanor. She wasn't just fudging the numbers. She was cooking the books to guarantee herself a huge performance bonus, one tied to hitting impossible revenue goals, and, as I found out later through discreet chats with a former colleague, to snag a C-suite job at a rival firm. I was staring at undeniable proof of corporate fraud, altered financial statements that could lead to SEC investigations, shareholder lawsuits, and reputational ruin for the company. This cold dread just washed over me, starting in my stomach and spreading to my limbs, making my hands tremble as I scrolled through the evidence. This wasn't just a toxic boss. This was a criminal hiding in plain sight, risking everything for personal gain. The realization hit me like a freight train. I was now entangled in something far bigger than office politics, and my next moves could define not just my career, but my entire future. I knew right then that I was in serious trouble, teetering on the edge of a precipice with no safety net in sight. If I reported what I found, I'd be painting a giant target on my back, inviting retaliation from a woman who had already proven her ruthlessness. Eleanor was vindictive, and she'd already shown she would crush anyone who got in her way, demoting a junior analyst for a minor error or isolating a team lead until they quit in frustration. But staying silent felt like I was helping her do it, complicit in the erosion of the company I loved. The ethical dilemma gnawed at me day and night, weighing on my conscience like an anchor. I stopped sleeping, my mind racing with scenarios of what could happen. The stress from work piled on top of the grief of losing my mom, whose final days I spent holding her hand in a sterile hospital room. And watching my dad get sicker with each passing week was just crushing me. His treatments left him frail, and I was juggling doctor appointments with deadlines, often crying in my car during lunch breaks. I felt totally alone, isolated in my knowledge, with no one to confide in without risking exposure. I started quietly looking into my options, reading up on whistleblower protection laws like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act during late-night sessions on my laptop. The laws are supposed to protect you from retaliation, offering anonymity and legal safeguards. But the stories I read online were terrifying, tales of whistleblowers facing blacklisting, harassment, and even personal threats. A lot of them, even when they were proven right, had their careers and lives ruined, forced into years of litigation or unemployment. I knew I couldn't just go to HR. They were under Eleanor's thumb, with the department head being one of her hand-picked allies. Eleanor had the whole executive team charmed, wining and dining them at exclusive events and feeding them glowing reports that masked her manipulations. I needed a plan that would protect me, but also make sure the truth came out, whether I was there to see it or not. A fail-safe that couldn't be undone. That's when I came up with my dead man's switch, a clever contingency born from desperation and determination. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully gathered every piece of evidence, working in stealth mode during off hours to avoid detection. I downloaded the doctored spreadsheets, saved email chains where I'd questioned the numbers, and Eleanor had shut me down with curt responses like, "Handle it internally," and took screenshots of the original data before she could wipe it from the servers. I even cross-referenced bank statements and vendor contracts to build an airtight case. I encrypted it all into a single, password-protected file using military-grade software I researched online, ensuring it was tamper-proof. Then I wrote a detailed, anonymous email explaining the whole scheme, from the initial discrepancies to the patterns of fraud, attaching the evidence and including timelines, affected projects, and potential legal ramifications. I addressed it to the only 2 people Eleanor couldn't fool: the lead partner of the external firm that audited our company, a no-nonsense accountant known for his integrity, and the private email of the board's notoriously strict ethics committee chairman, a veteran executive with a zero-tolerance policy for misconduct. Then, using a secure email service with end-to-end encryption and no IP logging, I scheduled it to send on a very specific date, exactly 1 year from that day. I picked a year for a reason. It was long enough for me to get clear of the explosion, rebuild my life away from the fallout, and long enough for Eleanor's own greed to make her sloppy, creating even more evidence for the board to find as she doubled down on her schemes. The timer was set, a silent guardian of justice. Now, all I had to do was survive the interim, navigating the minefield of her escalating aggression while keeping my composure. I didn't have to wait long for the storm to break. It was like Eleanor could smell that I knew, her instincts honing in on my subtle changes in behavior, the way I avoided unnecessary meetings or double-checked my work obsessively. Her passive-aggressive comments turned into open hostility, laced with sarcasm in team calls and veiled threats in one-on-ones. She put me on a performance improvement plan, making up vague problems like not being a team player or failing to align with departmental goals. It was a complete sham, just a paper trail to justify what she was about to do, filled with fabricated metrics and ignored my past accolades. My work, which had been praised for years in annual reviews and even earned me a company award, was suddenly not good enough, dismissed as outdated or inefficient. The final blow came on a Tuesday afternoon, just 3 weeks after I buried my father in a quiet cemetery ceremony attended by a handful of relatives. I was still walking around in a fog of grief, barely holding it together, my eyes puffy from nights of tears and my mind foggy from exhaustion. The office felt like a foreign land, every cubicle a reminder of what I'd lost. She called me into her glass office, the transparent walls offering no privacy from prying eyes. An HR rep was sitting next to her, wearing a practiced, sympathetic frown that didn't reach her eyes, clutching a folder of documents. "Haley," Eleanor started, her voice full of fake sincerity, dripping with condescension as she leaned back in her leather chair. "We've had some concerns about your performance. The company is moving in a new direction, and, unfortunately, your position is no longer required." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. There it was, that phrase, the one meant to break me, to strip away my dignity in a single sentence. I was being fired at the lowest point in my life, when vulnerability was at its peak and resilience at its nadir. She just watched me, probably expecting me to cry or yell, to give her the ammunition she needed for her narrative. She wanted a reaction, something that would prove I was the unstable employee she'd been telling everyone I was, whispering rumors in the executive lounge about my emotional instability due to personal issues. But I just felt nothing. All the anger and fear were gone, replaced by this strange, quiet calm that settled over me like a protective blanket. As she slid the termination papers across the table, standard forms outlining severance, minimal, and non-disclosure agreements, I just looked at her, meeting her gaze without flinching. I saw that little flicker of triumph in her eyes, a smug satisfaction that she had eliminated the threat. She thought she'd won. She thought she was silencing the only person who could expose her, securing her path to glory. As I signed the papers with a steady hand and walked out of that office for the last time, gathering my belongings under the sympathetic stares of colleagues, one thought kept repeating in my head. The clock is ticking. I didn't walk out of that building as a victim, shuffling in defeat. I walked out as the ghost of her future, head held high despite the ache in my chest. The feeling wasn't despair. It was relief, a profound unburdening. I was finally free from her shadow, and I knew justice was already on its way, ticking inexorably toward detonation. The next year was all about rebuilding, a painstaking process of piecing my life back together from the fragments left behind. I focused on my grief, attending therapy sessions where I unpacked the layers of loss, mourning my parents through journaling, support groups, and quiet walks in the park where memories flooded back. I found a new job at a smaller company with a culture that actually valued integrity, a startup focused on ethical AI where my skills in data analysis were appreciated without the cutthroat politics. The office was cozy with beanbag chairs and collaborative brainstorming sessions, and my new boss encouraged work-life balance, even offering mental health days. Life moved on gradually. I made new friends, took up yoga to manage stress, and even started volunteering at a cancer support center, turning my pain into purpose. I barely thought about Eleanor during the day, but that date was always in the back of my mind, the tiny, ticking time bomb I'd set, a beacon of hope amid the recovery. Then the day came, the 1-year anniversary of my firing, marked on my calendar with a subtle note, D-Day. I woke up early, went to my new job as usual, tackling a project on predictive modeling with enthusiasm. For a minute, as the hours ticked by without incident, I thought maybe it had all been for nothing. Maybe the email failed to send due to a technical glitch, or the board decided to bury it to protect their image, sweeping it under the rug like so many corporate scandals. Doubt crept in, making me question my plan's efficacy. But just as I was leaving work, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. It was a news alert from a financial journal I follow, one that covers tech industry upheavals. The headline was blunt and electrifying. Tech firm, company name, rocked by executive scandal. CFO fired amid fraud investigation. My heart started pounding like a drum, adrenaline surging through my veins as I pulled over to the side of the road. I clicked the link with trembling fingers. The article detailed how the board had received an anonymous tip, my email, and launched an immediate, thorough investigation into significant financial irregularities spanning multiple quarters. Eleanor wasn't the CFO, but she was named as the senior vice president at the very center of the probe. Her name splashed across the page alongside quotes from shocked insiders. She had been fired effective immediately, escorted out by security in a humiliating scene witnessed by the entire floor. They were completely restructuring her division after uncovering a deliberate and sustained effort to mislead the board and investors, with mentions of potential criminal charges and referrals to regulatory bodies like the SEC. I just sat in my car and read the article 3 times, absorbing every detail, the quotes from the ethics chairman praising the whistleblower's courage, the stock dip that followed the announcement, an internal memo leaked to the press outlining the extent of the fraud. It was all there, my evidence validated and amplified by their own findings. The fallout was catastrophic for her. Rumors swirled of her being blacklisted in the industry, her LinkedIn profile going dark, and even whispers of civil lawsuits from affected shareholders. There was no mention of my name, no public apology from the company, and I didn't get a call offering reinstatement or a single dime in compensation. But as I read about her spectacular downfall, the weight of years lifted from my shoulders, replaced by this incredible sense of vindication. It was never about getting my job back or seeking revenge in a flashy way. It was about the truth prevailing, about restoring balance in a world tilted by deceit. It was about knowing that even when powerful people think they're untouchable, one quiet little act of integrity, meticulously planned and patiently executed, can bring their whole world crashing down. Karma was slow, methodical, and unforgiving, but man, was its arrival devastating, a poetic justice that echoed through the corridors of power. My story doesn't have a Hollywood ending where I was carried back into the office on my colleagues' shoulders, cheered as a hero with confetti and applause. It has something better, a real one, grounded in the messy authenticity of life. It proves that standing up for what's right, even when you feel powerless and isolated, really matters in the long run. The system doesn't always work the way it should, full of delays, biases, and cover-ups. But sometimes, through sheer persistence and clever strategy, it does, delivering a blow that resonates far beyond the individual. If you have a story about a toxic boss getting what they deserved, perhaps a micromanager exposed for plagiarism, or a manipulative leader caught in their own lies, I seriously want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, drawing strength from your shared experiences. Your stories matter, and they remind all of us that we're not alone in this corporate jungle, that solidarity can be a powerful force against injustice. And if you want to hear more stories of karmic justice, tales of comeuppance that inspire and caution, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. Thanks for listening to my journey from despair to triumph. Remember to trust your gut, protect your integrity with every fiber of your being, and sometimes the best thing you can do is be patient enough to let karma do its thing, weaving its intricate web until the moment is ripe for revelation.